Hi, this is Clarence Moye here with Emmy nominee Natasha Rothwell, of course, of the White Lotus, Thailand. Natasha, it's fantastic to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
So, you and I spoke after your first nomination for the Maui season, and we talked about that incredible, very honest, very emotional Instagram reaction that you had to that first nomination. How's the second nomination different for you?
It was just as emotional. I had landed in the UK and I was coming from Heathrow Airport to my hotel, and I was trying to watch the live announcements, and Wi-Fi wasn't steady because I was in a car, and my driver pulled up to the hotel, and I was just like, just set my stuff on the sidewalk because I'm waiting to hear this announcement. So I'm outside of the hotel, and I thought my category would be announced live, but it wasn't. And so then I was desperately searching, trying to figure out. And then my phone rang, and it was my publicist, and I burst into like uncontrollable tears. And so those tears the first time were private. This was in front of the entire staff of this hotel. If you know anything about British people, they're not, one to deal with like a lot of emotion. And so they didn't know what to do with me. And I was just literally crying and being like, oh my God, oh my God. And they're like, are you okay? I was like, I just got nominated for an Emmy. And they're like, I don't know what that is. I was like, it's like a BAFTA.
Look it up. There's a website called Emmys.com.
Yeah, it was so sweet. And yeah, it was the same emotion, if not more, because I just didn't expect it. The cast is so incredible and large, and so yeah, it took me by surprise and made me weep.
Well, it's very clear that the voters had this emotional connection to not only you, but also to Belinda, because they obviously wanted to see Belinda come back. What did it take for you to get back into Belinda's skin? I mean, how did you how did you approach her differently this time?
Season one, while there wasn't a lot of her in the text, her
Mhm.
inside world was robust. And so for me, the difference between playing her season one and two, it was just letting that inner world, that inner life out. And so she still was the same to me, but audiences are, I think, able to see the version of her that she had to compartmentalize because she was at work and she couldn't really allow those parts of herself to come out. Um, and Carrie Coon gave me the best analogy. She's just like, whenever you put on a character again, it's like putting on a wet bathing suit. It's a little weird, but then once you
Mhm.
have it on and you jump in the water, it feels the same. And I felt that way with Belinda, when I was on set, I was like, my shoulders left my ears, and I was like, oh, there she is. Like she's here. Like it felt so wonderful to put her on again.
Mike White obviously gives us a different side of Belinda than we've ever seen before. It's Belinda taking charge in the end of the season between in this exchange, this negotiation scene toward the end of the season between Zion and Belinda and Greg, where she's leaving the negotiation room and she tells Zion very specifically, "You go back and you do this, and this is what you handle, and this is how you do it." That must have been a revelation to you to be able to play that take charge side of Belinda.
Yeah, and I pitched that moment. It was so awesome to read the original pages, and originally as it was scripted, Zion took over the negotiations and Belinda wasn't there. She was just like in the hallway waiting. And I remember I told Mike, we go through the pages together and he's so collaborative, and I was just like, I'd love to see Belinda have some agency, and
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily be rescued by her son, but also be culpable in whatever happens. And he's like, oh, I love that. And then I saw the new pages and I freaked out because I was like, oh, this is such a beautiful blend of her allowing her son to be the man of the house a little bit and step up for her, but her also letting him know, I'm older than you. I've been around the block before. And like, I can tell we have him against the ropes. So let's make sure we land the plane. And it makes you see Belinda's excitement around the opportunity to, you know, get what she's dreamed of. Her proximity to making her dreams come true are so close. And so I just loved that moment so much because we see her excitement and her authority and that she's decided to break bad. Like there's a decision
Mhm.
that she makes in that moment where she's just like, we're going to do this.
There's another moment that's much earlier in the show. I think it might be in the pilot episode, or maybe it's in the second, where Belinda's sitting at dinner, and of course she eats dinner alone quite a bit, because she's isolated. She's in between these worlds of a guest. She's kind of a guest. She's kind of staff, but she's not really either. So she's in between and kind of isolated there. But there's a moment where Belinda's sitting and she sees two other black guests come in, and just the look on your face, you're just very excited, you're interested, you want to talk to them, and they just they did their own thing, and you had to kind of rein that in a little bit. Tell me about that moment. I mean, there's no dialogue there, but just that physical reaction to that I thought was really beautiful.
Yeah, that also was a byproduct of a conversation I had with Mike, and we were just talking about luxury travel and Black people and, homogenous faces. And I told him the story of I was traveling in Ireland and I was visiting this castle on a hill. And through the mist, it felt very magical. I saw this Black family, and I was the only Black person there up until that point. They kind of walk up, and we just started walking towards each other and hugged. We didn't even speak before we hugged. I just kind of hugged them, and I stepped back and I was like, "Do you speak English?" And they're like, "Yes." And we just started talking, and it was this moment where it's validating each other's experience and telling them
Mm-hmm.
you belong. And so
Mm-hmm.
when I told Mike that story and I saw this in the script, I was just thrilled. And originally I had a scene with that couple later on, it got cut. And I'm kind of relieved because I felt like that moment was so much more powerful in just those looks, because that's 9 times out of 10 what it is. When I'm traveling and I'm in a homogenous space and I see someone else of color, usually it's a look or a nod of just like, you're safe, I'm here, I see you. And so to give Belinda that moment, I think it was amazing for like for me as an actor to give space for that experience. And then also I think for Belinda, she sees them and sees that, like you said, she's in between worlds. There's a worker and a guest, but she sees someone who's strictly in that space. And it
Mm-hmm.
gives her permission to dream. And I think that happened for me. Before I ever flew first class, I remember walking through first class on a plane and seeing a Black couple sitting there, and I'm like, and it's like, oh, I could do that too. So it's really beautiful to have those moments shown.
There's been a lot of dialogue. There's been a lot of conversation, particularly after the season came out, about what Belinda does at the end of the season to Porn Chai and how that may or may not be related or similar to what Belinda and Tanya, to that interaction from the Maui season. It's a very different interaction, the way that Belinda leaves. Why do you think Belinda can't have this combination of love and money? Why do you think she chooses money and puts porn shy to the side?
I think she does choose love. I think she chooses herself. And, she's clearly was a young mom. She's a single mom, and her work is dedicated to making other people feel loved and comfortable. And I think for her, when and I was reminded of this myself. I remember when I was poor and struggling in New York, and I remember thinking, I don't think I'll ever know a time where my entire real estate of my mind is not dedicated to thinking about how I'm going to pay my rent. And with that real estate gone, what would I do and what would I think about? And I think about that in terms of Belinda, that this windfall has freed up the space in her mind that has been dedicated to other people and is for the first time allowed to think about what she wants for herself. So for me, I don't think it's not choosing love. I think she's choosing to love herself in this moment and not compromise the purity of that with romantic love or spark. But I definitely think that once she's had that time for herself and really knows what she wants to do and really has taken care of herself for probably the first time in her life, she'll definitely find love. We can definitely see that she's open to it this trip. Circumstances have changed. And she doesn't say, like, this wasn't real or, I won't see you again. It's just, I have to sort of pause and assess. But I do think it is a question a lot of women ask themselves, is it either or? But I think it's a both and. It's just not right now.
Yes, and it's a different kind of love. It's this season is one of the themes is a spiritual journey. There are so many characters that in this season they talk about spirituality quite a bit. But is that her spiritual journey? Do you think, sort of discovering her sense of self, discovering her own freedom? Is that the journey that Belinda goes on this year?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think for her, she's always been very spiritual. Um, when she sings to Tanya in season one,
Mm-hmm.
she taps into something bigger than herself, but it's always been in service of someone else. And I think this is a conversation about spirituality. The whole season, speaks to that in major ways. And I think for her, she's figuring out what it's like to really commune with herself and understand where she stands in the grand scheme of things and ask those big questions. And I do think that is the luxury of financial security. It allows you the space to indulge in that curiosity.
So, last question for you. You're wrapping the season. Yours is the last face that we see in season three. She's got the money. She's got Zion. You guys survived. Nobody got shot. And she's on that boat and she's looking back. And I have this idea about what's going on in her head, but I was curious as to what you thought was going on in her head in that last moment as she's sort of smiling wistfully at the resort.
There was a line that got cut. It was the last line of the series. And it's in that moment, and Belinda says, "There is a God."
Mhm.
And for me, I think in that moment, that underscores her feelings. She feels the largeness of the world and the universe, and the that she is now in a position to participate in the goodness and the plenty of abundance. And so
Mhm.
I think in that moment, that's where her mind is. It's just, like you said, she's safe. Her son is safe. She now has the opportunity to dream big. And for her, it's like, oh, there is a God. And you can see that journey of disbelief to belief over the course of this season because she's curious and she's trying to figure it out. And the catharsis, I think, of her in saying that in that moment and go literally riding off into the sunset, I
Mhm.
think it's just a beautiful moment of her coming in home to herself.
Yeah, yeah. When I looked at that, I kind of imagined seeing her sort of looking at those smiling faces, waving goodbye, and she has done that so many times before in Maui. And I thought, oh, this is Belinda thinking this is what it's like to be on that other side. This is and thinking about the future where she'll get to experience that much more with that 5 million.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that yeah, she sees a bit of herself she's leaving behind because
Mhm.
things have changed. And so she's waving goodbye to that version of herself.
Thank you very much, Natasha. This is a beautiful performance. I loved revisiting Belinda. And of course, the combination of you and Mike White working together on this character has just been absolute magic.
Well, thank you so much. I loved the experience and I always love talking to you.